say, from Seville, and we're presenting Pastel QAnon vaccination, regret, and epistemic reparation as cases for maybe epistemic injustice or cases where epistemic injustice can appear. So we're gonna go with two examples to explain how the field of conspiracy theories and epistemic injustice can be put together. So our examples would be first Pastel QAnon, which is like a way of adapting the QAnon theories or the QAnon conspiracy theories for women or for a group with these pastel images or this pastel posting. And the second example we will be analyzing or thinking about is the regret movement. A regret movement is a movement that appeared in Ireland after the vaccination of girls with the HPV vaccine for human papillomavirus, and some families and groups thought that these vaccines were causing problems to the health of their girls and their children. So they were thinking of this like a conspiracy. So we're gonna try to put together these two things. And this is our scheme, our trip. And first we will be speaking about obviously conspiracy theories. First we will be addressing the definition we want to go with, which will be a minimal definition. And we will be pointing to problematic groups we will call conspiracy theories. And then we will put together with those ideas the epistemic injustice field, and we will be explaining both of the injustices, but only focusing on two types of injustices in the hermeneutical domain. And our hypothesis will be that some conspiracy theories, what we will call conspiranoid theories, would produce some kind of epistemic damage or some kind of epistemic injustice, will be producing, exploiting these injustices, okay? So we will be kind of addressing these issues with the examples we are going to present, and we will address both of them in the sense of exploitation and in the sense of production of injustice. For that, we will start with the term that we will use, or the definition that we will use for conspiracy theory, which be a minimal definition in the sense of towards any theory or explanation that speaks about a conspiracy. And we will be aware that this puts together many explanations of theories that we will be happy to call plausible or likely, and other theories that are not as unproblematic as the other ones, like the flat earth theory. So we will be a little bit further distinguishing only a group of problematic theories. We will be following what Daniel is doing in another project, the term conspiracy theories, kind of basing our idea on the way in Spain we speak about conspiracy theories and conspiracy theories. We separate those terms in Spanish, I think, not only in Spain, but for the problematic group. And we will acknowledge that other authors have already pointed out to some of these problems and some of the problematic group with other terms, with unwarranted conspiracy theories with capitalized letters, or as Emily said, suspicious conspiracy theories. The other field we'll be discussing is the epistemic injustice field. I guess you already know about this, but as you know, an epistemic injustice is a rundown to someone, specifically in the capacity as a knower. And there are two kinds, the testimonial and the hermeneutical types by Miranda Fricker. The first is a problem with the credibility of the speaker or the testimony of the speaker. And the second kind, which is our interest, is more related to a gap or a lacuna in the collective interpretative resources. And that's where the problems will be. To summarize, we'll be putting together these two fields, epistemic injustice with other definitions, and the other field that you're interested in, which is conspiracy theories, and only, as we said, this problematic group, this small group of conspiranoid theories. To say or to address this problem, that is that some conspiracy theories might be exploiting and producing some epistemic injustices. Our hypothesis clearly will be that some conspiranoid theories can be exploiting injustice in the sense of taking advantage of the ability to make sense of someone's experiences or these lacunas in the collective resources. And secondly, they will be producing further injustice, new injustices, because they might be promoting new ways of injustice when they take the space of these lacunas, of these resources. These two injustices or these two problems or harms, if you want to call it, will be connected and will be possibilitating the other. Just to be clear, we do not want to claim that marginalized communities are more prone to believe in conspiranoid thinking, but we are stating that some marginalized communities might be in a position where they be at risk of believing or adopting this kind of thinking. Okay, so the harms will be deeper and will be longer in time. For our purposes, we will be differentiating two kinds of epistemic injustice, two kinds of hermeneutical injustice in the way Gatze does. He goes up to 6 types. We are only interested in 2 kinds of them because we're interested in the cases where the agent is lacking the proper resources to make sense of their own experiences, not that others or other communities, other groups are having problems, only the agent itself. And those 2 cases are called by Gatze hermeneutical effacement and hermeneutical separation. If you know a little bit the literature, this can be traditionally exemplified with the case of Carmita Wu, and the second case would be the case of postpartum depression, where these terms were now in the collective resources and they have no resources to explain their own experiences. So this will be the 2 kind of hermeneutical injustice we would be interested in.
Okay, so getting into some of the details of how these damages are exploited and produced, first we are going to address the idea of exploiting the epistemic injustice. So Lola just explained that in the cases of hermeneutical injustice that we are dealing with, is the group itself that doesn't have the concept to make certain of their own experiences. And as a consequence, they can come to believe some conspiracy theory. We are especially focused on these 2 cases, Pastel QAnon and vaccination regret, that provides them with explanations to make sense of those experiences that are here exactly this. You can have a hermeneutical gap for understanding your experiences, but it doesn't mean that any explanation for them that you come to believe will satisfy the purposes of understanding them. So here we found very useful the concept of epistemic reparation by Jennifer Lackey. It's certain actions made to acknowledge and redress wrongs to individuals or collectives in the form of material or symbolic goods. And these have 2 dimensions. One is the right to know what has happened to you, which we think it's threatened by the poor quality of the explanations that we are dealing with in these 2 cases. And then there is the dimension of the right to be known and the right to having someone to acknowledge what has happened to you and to know, which also implies believing you and believing that what you hold for what happened to you is true. So remember, we have first the case of vaccination regret. Here we see a very clear example of addressing the need for epistemic reparation, the right to know what has happened to you. So this group is amplifying the voices and making public the symptoms that young girls in Ireland are suffering, which we think it's totally legitimate to acknowledge that there are many injustices and many symptoms suffered by women that due to previous injustices are not properly addressed by the health care system. And Rosika addresses this in her paper, linking that to previous injustices that have happened, especially in Ireland. And the problem that we would like to show is that while it's legitimate to address these worries and to point out that these possible symptoms have not been addressed properly. Like the explanation of blaming everything on the vaccines is problematic because that may hold people like girls and these women from, for example, paying attention to all the work that is being done on feminist analysis of science, showing biases and flawed procedures and scientific practice. And getting to some details of what is Pastel QAnon, this has been analyzed by Argentino. The idea is that there have been some aesthetic and rhetorical changes in the QAnon conspiracy theory. So we go from this very masculine and sometimes like openly misogynistic movement and doing this kind of big for her advertising strategy. So we have some facial colors up there and so, and some changes in rhetorical strategy, and we come to this. So we have a different aesthetics, and also some of the claims are more focused on defending children, stop child abuse, and so on. So the idea is that, again, all the legitimate worries that women could have hair are put aside, and then the problems are led more to the satanistic cabal ruling the world, for example, in the case of QAnon or whatever other claims about powerful groups are out there. And apart from that problem with shifting the explanation to ends that are highly unlikely or hold any of the other epistemic issues that we were showing here, there can be practical harms, like not getting necessary vaccine. We also find very worrisome the possibility of the community being excluded further. A case would be like, for example, in the case of Pastel QAnon, if you are dragged to adhere to that movement, you will only be holding more like far-fetched beliefs or more likely beliefs. You will also have chances to be stigmatized or in the base of possible irrationality of your beliefs, or in the case of QAnon, like adhering to a whole political movement that, as it's denounced here by some activists, can constitute like a white supremacist movement or misogynistic movement. So now they would very likely be in good grounds to deny any trust to you because you've become part of ill intention or politically problematic movement. And just on the same line, this can also lead to isolation for the community if you also accept that going down the rabbit hole can lead to all these dynamics or forming of echo chambers that you are probably aware of that are big concerns when we discuss the particular problematic group of conspiracy theories. So just to wrap up, we wanted to link some tools from social epistemology to the study of conspiracy theories. We focus on these two cases, but we think that they can be expanded to different problematic groups that are being discussed in the literature. And we wanted to show how at least some conspiracy theories exploit epistemic injustice and produce these 2 or 3 different harms of epistemic harms that are that we've pointed out. Last seconds, we wanted to mention some further questions that we found working on this. And the broader question is, who is a victim when we are thinking about this problem? So we have like some victims when they come to adhere to these movements, they might suffer epistemic injustice in the way we describe themselves, but then if they spread the theory, they become perpetrators and they replicate what happened. We also thought important thinking about different roles in the movement and how they are impacted by these injustices and how they produce them. Harambach works, which we think is in the room, was particularly appealing. And lastly, we thought that it was very relevant to take into consideration that this exploitation of the victim status can be used even when the victim is not objectively a victim. So, for example, you can make some very advantageous groups like white males in Western Europe to believe that they are victims of a huge conspiracy and then deploy all this strategy to convince them. Thank you very much.
Thanks.